Okay, we're back to get the front timing components all put onto this engine.
And hey, maybe we'll even set the lash on the valves. That'd be great. Let's do it.
So to start with, we're going to put the covers on the front of the engine here, the plastic covers. The manual states to start with the right hand side. So don't forget there's a rubber seal kind of along this one side here. And this one pops up on here with the seal against the engine block there. Tuck in behind. There we go. And it is wise to put some Loctite on these ones because if these were to back out, they would go right into the cam sprocket, and we don't want that. So not much. We're just going to put a little bit of medium thread locker on these little guys. And then the torque for them is 3.6 foot-pounds, which, you know, if you multiply by 12 gives you inch-pounds, and then you can use a lower ranged torque wrench if yours doesn't go that sensitive, which mine doesn't. And honestly, 3.6 foot-pounds, that's almost nothing. So if you were just going to kind of estimate this torque, it's very light. Very light amount of torque. So this is 10 millimeters. So barely more than the weight of this torque wrench is what it is. So if you're going by feel, not much at all. It's another reason I feel a little more comfortable putting some Loctite on there. And off camera this morning, I also put the a new oil pressure switch on there, just because mine seemed to have been leaking out of the top. So not good, making a mess everywhere. Okay, so next I actually want to put the other cover on, but I noticed here too that the we're 180 degrees out on the crankshaft here for timing. So I'm going to put the bolt in here so we can spin the engine over. Okay, and the engine's timed on the crank correctly when the mark here and here is lined up with the little notch on the sensor there. All right, and the other cover goes down here. This is the what they call the right hand cover, because this is the right side of the engine. And we shouldn't really need Loctite on the bottom here, but I'm going to put a little bit on anyway. There we go. Okay, for our next magic trick, we're going to put the camshaft sprockets on. And in case you mix these up, it's really quite simple. This one's stamped with L for the left side of the engine, which is, of course, if you're sitting in the driver's seat, the left driver's side, so they'd be this side. It also is the only one of the two that has these protrusions here, and those are timing marks for the camshaft position sensor right here that picks up the rotation of the engine for the computer. And when you put them on, there's a keyway here that matches the, or a key that matches the keyway rather, on the shaft. So it'll only fit in one position. This one's of course marked R for right side. Now comes the tricky bit. We have to torque these down to, what is it, 58 foot-pounds, which is a fair amount. I have been able to do it with one of these guys before, so let's see if we'll give this a whirl. So we use the strap wrench to put on opposing force. Maybe, that's the hope anyway. Okay. We did it. And the other one. Not too terribly bad. They do make a tool that fits these to hold them, but unless you're doing these engines all the time, I don't know if that's really worth it. It isn't for me at the moment, but maybe one day. Let's go down here so I don't whack myself on the knuckle. Let's see if we can get this jammed up against the water neck here. Like this. There we go. Now, I've said it before, these are interference engines, but with the crank on this timing mark here, we're free to rotate these without collisions between valves and cylinders, which is great because we're going to want to put these timing marks into place now. So it's much easier with a non-ratcheting wrench, of course. So get yourself a wrench, because it's going to want to spring back on you at a certain point where the springs overtake it. You'll find a spot where it wants to sit. Right there. This little notch will be lined up with this cutout notch in the cover. And over here it's right where the head and cam cap meet. Should be right there. There we go. So we are all aligned here now with these three marks. in preparation for the belt. So let me grab all those parts and get them lined out. Okay, so when you're getting the tensioner ready to install, if it's a brand new one, you're going to want to compress and uncompress the piston 3 times, and each time it should take you 3 minutes to fully compress it. I'm going to be reusing this one because it's brand new and the belt doesn't even have the writing worn off on it yet. So this engine's been apart recently. Obviously it was the head gasket that failed, not the timing set. So we're going to install this one. But I just took my time, and over 3 minutes or more, I just used a hand clamp and compressed it, and then you just put anything 2 millimeters diameter. I just happen to use a 2 millimeter Allen key. Stick it in the hole there at the top, and that'll keep it in place. There we go. So a little Loctite on this guy. 29 foot-pounds for all the pulleys on the front of the engine. There we go. And now we've got one more pulley. And he sits down here, but we're not going to put him in just yet because it's easier to get the belt on while he's not in there. So we'll grab the belt. And it says the writing on the belt should be legible when you install it. So what that means is the writing on the belt, you should be able to read it. So this way, so that when you flip it, you can read the writing. And you can see this one's still got all the writing on it. It's in really good shape. So we're going to loop it over top of the crankshaft first, under the tensioner, and onto the camshaft, and simply do the same thing on the other side. Like that. Then what we can do is take the belt, check that your tension, when you take up the slack over here, this one is sort of stuck here. This one's free to rotate. So get these two so there's no slack here, so you know you're on the right tooth. And then this one you can pull back a bit to get the tension taken up. So what I like to do is start over here, loop it up over the water pump. Oops. Sometimes you need to loosen this guy too, which it looks like we'll have to do. So just worry about this side. Get it lined up here. Then recheck this side and then reinstall this cog pulley here. Okay, once you've verified the tire marks again, then we can go ahead and put this other pulley on. Okay, we'll throw a little Loctite on the last one. And then you just need to kind of push up while you put this guy in. Shoulder goes on the inside. And then just make sure you don't cross thread him on there. Okay, there we go. So now everything's in place. We're going to rotate the engine a couple of times just to make sure that the timing marks still line up after a couple of rotations. And then we should be good to proceed. Okay, we're back on time here, and I'm out 180 degrees here. So that means we've only gone around to half the engine cycle. We need to get back on the compression stroke. So for every rotation, 360 degree rotation on the camshafts, the crankshaft has to rotate twice. So we got to go twice around on the crankshaft. And we are lined up. Perfect. Everything looks okay. So now we can pull this pin out, which is super satisfying, like pulling a pin on a grenade. There we go. Don't lose the key. And we are done timing wise. So I think what I want to do next is check the valve clearances. So we'll pull off the covers on the valve covers here and do that before we put the covers back on the front of the engine here, because we're going to need to look at the timing in order to know which one we're adjusting. So all right, engine's back together in terms of timing belt and front assembly. She rotates in time now, which is great. We were shooting for that. Now, how about the valves? The valves on this engine are adjustable, and we've monkeyed with them. We've had the heads off, we've had the rocker assemblies off, so at the very least we need to check those to make sure the lash is set correctly still, and probably just go ahead and adjust it. We'll have to adjust it obviously if it's off. So how do we do that? We've set these 3 marks. Surely that means we're at top dead center somewhere or something's happy, right? Nope, not true. These are only here to facilitate putting the timing belt back on and the front components on the engine. And the reason for that is when this mark is at the top, the engine cylinders are all in their center bores, so that when you rotate either of the camshafts, none of the valves are going to collide with the cylinder, with the pistons in the top of the cylinders. That's the only reason those are there. With this on this mark, you can spin these wherever you need to get things installed, get the belt on, get everything timed correctly. After that, they're no longer useful to us. However, over here on this camshaft sprocket, I'll show you. So on the left camshaft sprocket, you'll see this arrow here. This arrow right now is just pointing off at the, what, 2 o'clock mark? 1:30. When this arrow is pointing straight up, cylinder 1 is at top dead center. And that is the trick we're going to use to set our valves. Because to set the valves, the cylinder that we're setting has to be at top dead center. Because at top dead center, both the exhaust and intake valves are closed. And that means the rockers aren't putting any force on them to open them. So that is when you have the most lash or slack on the valve. So we're pointing up now. Cylinder 1 should be at top dead center. And I'll pull up a little illustration for you guys here. Cylinder 1 is this guy at the front right side of the engine. And what becomes very important here when we're doing the valve lash adjustment is the firing order. The firing order is 1, 3, 2, 4 on this engine, just showing up at the top there. And the reason that's important is right now we're at top dead center number 1 when this is pointing up. You remember it takes 2 full rotations of the crankshaft to get 1 rotation on the camshaft. So for the engine to spin around, we would have to then, once this is a top dead center number 1, we would have to rotate the camshaft 180 degrees, which will bring this down by 90 degrees. So if I've spun this 180 down to the bottom, that's only moved half as far. That's only moved to the 3 o'clock position, which if you remember 1 full rotation of the engine, all 4 cylinders have to fire, right? So for each half a rotation, that guy's next. So what that means is when this is pointing 90 degrees, that's going to be the next cylinder, which would be in the order of firing orders number 3. So when we go to do the valves, number 1's first with it pointing straight up. Number 3, you remember, is in the back corner. So when this is 90 degrees this way, that's going to be number 3. If you remember our little diagram. And if we turn the crankshaft another 180 degrees, this here will move another 90, which will then, you guessed it, number 2 in terms of firing order will be the next one to be adjusted. Once we rotate this another 180, this will become the 9 o'clock position, which will be cylinder number 4, the last one. And lastly, once you rotate another 180 degrees, this will be facing up again and we'll be back at cylinder number 1. So let me rotate this back. Let me rotate this back to the cylinder 1 top dead center position. And then we will look at the valves. Right about there. Okay, so I've got number 1 set for top dead center, and I've just rotated the engine here and the camera so we can see it a little better. So now in this position, this camshaft for cylinder 1 should not be exerting any force on the valves. Try to open them because we want them both closed for the compression stroke on number 1. So if you wiggle these, see that? There's a little slop there, little slop here, and a little slop down here on the exhaust. Remember, the top is the intake where the intake bolts up, the bottom is going to be the exhaust where the exhaust bolts up. So intake, exhaust. There's 2 adjustments here for the 2 valves on the intake and 2 more for the 2 on the exhaust. So the way we're going to check this is with a feeler gauge. And the tolerance for the intakes is supposed to be set at 8 thousandths. I don't know if you guys can see that, 8 thousandths. So if 8 thousandths fits under with some good resistance, but the next one up 9 thousandths doesn't, then we're good. So let's see where we're at here. So there's some drag there on that one. Feels actually just about right. So let's check the next size up, the 9. And I can get the 9 under, so that's a little too loose. And on this other one, I can still get the 9 under. So these two definitely have to be tightened a little bit. So what you do is you take your 10mm wrench, loosen the jam nuts, and then you can take yourself a slotted screwdriver and you do the old righty-tighty, lefty-loosey method. So I'm just cranking these down until they bite the feeler gauge and then backing them off slightly to get some good drag on there. Then I'll bring the 9 thou in, and I should not be able to get it underneath. I can't. And I can't. So that's where we want those. So then to set them, hold the center screw with your screwdriver so it doesn't wander, and tighten the lock nut. Just a little snug for now, and then recheck. So I can get the 8 under there with a good bit of drag. Let's try the 9. Nope. Nope. Okay, so these are set. We're going to come back later and torque all these to spec. For now, that's jam tight enough, it won't move. The spec for the exhaust valves is a little bit looser. It's 10 thou. So I've got my 10 thou out here. That one feels good. This one's actually pretty good. Let's try the 11. Does not go through. And does not go through there. So this one's actually set okay. We did touch these. We're not going to worry about which ones we touch now. We'll go back at the end and torque everything down. So number 1 is complete. So now, if I rotate the crank 180 degrees, and you'll see right now, these are tight because the exhaust isn't, the intake is. So it's in some sort of intake sequence on the engine right now. So let's go 180. Our arrow is now pointing straight to 3 o'clock, and we should have slack on both these. Yep. And yes. So we'll go ahead, we'll repeat this on number 3. We'll go another 180, which will put the arrow down at 6. We'll do number 2. Then we'll go another 180, which will move the arrow to 9 o'clock, and then we'll do number 4. And I'll come back after I've set them all, and then we'll have a quick look, and we'll torque them down. Okay, torque on these nuts, 7.2 foot-pounds. Obviously the ones we didn't touch are still at the right torque. Flip the engine over and do the other side. There we go. Okay, now put the covers back on. Torque for the valve cover bolts, 3.6 foot-pounds. Okay, now with that all back together, we can take our main timing cover and assemble that. Just like so. And all these take the same bolts except for one, and he goes down here near the oil filter where there's a metal sleeve in this one hole here. That's where his home is. All the rest are these shoulder bolts. And I'm missing one, which I'm gonna have to go dig up. Okay, this engine is about as excited as I am to get itself back in its little home under the power barn, as my favorite YouTuber would say. But we have a couple stragglers left to finish. We've got this left-hand cover to put back on over here with its couple of bolts. You'll probably have 3 bolts. I have 2. Somebody broke out one of them. And if you recall from when we took this engine out, I broke this pipe off here, which is had become really hard. This here used to live somewhere around here. And it broke, or was already broken. I'm not even sure. It's pretty clean under there, so I'm pretty sure I broke it. And it ran fine, so that's probably it. This is the part number for that hose, in case you guys break yours. They get very brittle, so it's very likely. So that's going to go on here. So all I'm going to do is put the new hose on this half for now. And I'll just remove this hard part off here for now, just to make it easier for later, because it's out in the stand right now. Nice and easy to get to. So I'm going to take care of that. And then I think we're going to get this thing hooked up to the crane. Finally. Bet you never saw that coming. You weren't expecting that, probably. Well, there you go. That's how brittle those got. It's just, it's plastic at this point. You know what? I think I'm going to actually score this with a knife and take it off here, because I don't want to break the plastic fitting in there. Thankfully it feels pretty rubbery still at the top there, where it wasn't exposed to the gases, but there we go. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Nice supple hose. Very good. So we'll just set this aside and we'll assemble this once the engine's in the car.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next episode, this thing is finally getting put back where it belongs, under the hood of this thing. So tune in next time when we reinstall this engine and we'll fire it up for the first time again. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.